When I started this YouTube channel, kind of my basic idea was more or less just to share my experience, what I think of the things I purchase, because I don't receive any stuff from any manufacturer, so I'm just purchasing and paying for everything myself, and then I have to be quite selective just to pick the planes I think is interesting. And over time I've learned that I really like the 1.2 to 1.3 high wing planes with just lots of features like flaps, lights, floats and such, because the most flying I do, or almost all flying I do, is either on grass, on water or on snow. So that's just me. I mean, I know some pilots might like really tiny planes just so they can fly kind of in a football field or in a backyard, and some like really large charge airplane, but to me it is like 1.2 to 1.3. And I'm also really not interested in purchase like really large and expensive batteries, so I just set a limit to 4S 2200 for all my RC airplanes. So that's kind of the limit. So then again, the plane I'm going to talk about today is the Durafly Tundra version 3, and this is a plane in a 1.3 wingspan, so it just suits the right size for me. It features flaps, lights, really nice lights, floats included. It's a complete package then, except for the receiver, transmitter and battery, and it runs on a 4S 2200 milliamp. So I've just mounted floats on this plane right now, and I really want to see how this one flies. So let's go outside and do float flying on the Tundra version 3. Time to get this plane up in the air using half flaps. So I made a few flights just to adjust a few things, and the most important thing I had to just figure out was the flap setting. So I'm just using 12% elevator mix then for half flaps, and then it works great. It does feel like really nice agility, especially when you just push it on 4S. Roll rate is really great, no resistance. You can even snap it. Didn't want to really turn around too much. Maybe the floats then make it a little bit more sluggish. So there's some wind today, but not too bad. Actually, it's quite good to have wind sometimes, just because it's easy to take off, and especially when you have floats, which do become a little bit more sticky. But as I discovered then, just using half flaps, face the wind, you will have a really nice takeoff. You can even do nice point rolls, really. No worries when you just go around and control this plane. It's very solid. And just as with all planes then, when it comes to how I like them, when you have a fast rolling plane with no hesitation, it just becomes so much more enjoyable to fly. You don't have to worry if you have enough aileron authority just to go around. So surely point rolls are really easy with this plane.
Frame is 18, hold 0. Time remaining 4 minutes.
And overall, I think float flying is just a fantastic thing to do during the summer and even the winter then on snow. So let's go in for a touch and go, full flaps, using throttle just to manage it. Just going into takeoff flaps, and we're about to take off. I discovered that when you just have full flaps on this plane and you take off, it does jump up in the air a little bit sooner, but also I think it's just a nicer look when you have half flaps. So I think it's kind of pitch up a little bit too steep with full flaps. Overall, kind of a good prop and engine sound. You can do inverted flying quite easy. I just increased elevator authority just to have a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to control up and down, especially then during inverted flying. You can see, I mean, just going around doing figure eight, even with floats, Really great performance. So I'm not really pushing 100%. I really don't need the power except when I'm just want to do some really agile flying. So let's go in for another touch and go then. Really easy, just use throttle to control the descent.
Take off flat. Flaps up.
Just using rudder also to make nicer looking turns. Just keep the nose down. Pushing 100%. And it rolls so effortless.
Frame number 44. Hold.
I mean, it's really nice power on 4S. I don't think it's as agile or as speedy as my Arrows RC Bigfoot, for instance. But I also think that it's a kind of a more enjoyable experience to fly this plane compared to the Turbo Timber Evolution. It is certainly more solid than on water, doesn't really wag around, so I think that maybe the stance on this plane is just wider. You can see that I just had a kind of a sharp turn, but I think it got caught in the wave or something. And then also just compared to the Night Timber X, which is a 1.2 meter plane, Night Timber X is a much more heavier RC plane because this is a lightweight plane. But just you cannot really have the same agility as the Night Timber X. It's just a fantastic float flying, agile, aerobatic plane. But as an all-arounder, I think that this Tundra is just great. It's also a cheaper plane, and you have floats included. So it's a complete package. Go fly in any season, really. I mean, really well-controlled plane. Nothing is over-controlled. I can have a really solid flight path. And as I said, it just rolls really effortless. So here's another landing then. Very easy, just flare, use throttle to control the descent, and then you're down. I mean, it's just a more or less just great looking and fantastic Tundra. I'm really digging this plane. I think I will do lots of float flying with this Tundra. This is a very enjoyable plane to fly. With the 4S battery, you have the power just to push through things. It is a plane that rolls easy, and it's also very easy to fly. So I think that this plane would just suit almost anyone, just from a kind of a almost beginner to expert pilot, because you can certainly just have such a great time to fly this plane. And certainly the 4S, compared then to the version 2, has really improved the agility on this plane. I don't feel anything lacking in kind of the elevator authority or the aileron authority. It's just fantastic. I had to figure out my flap setting, so for full flaps then I ended up having like 40% elevator mix. For half flaps I have 12%, and then it flew without ballooning. The assemble of this Tundra, it's quite good. You have just a kind of a bag of screws. You have a quick connector then for the servo cables inside the wings. You don't have to fill it with cable, which is really great. The only thing you have to glue on this plane are the vortex generators, and I think that they could have had them pre-installed, or like on some other brands, and when you have kind of they just put into the mold of the wing, which is a much needed solution, because these are quite sharp and you can certainly just scrape your skin or get caught in something. Interesting enough, I had kind of this extra piece in the box which contains 3 of these generators just glued together like a big mistake. So I'm not sure if this piece is supposed to go somewhere or if it's made to have kind of a extra toy. I don't know, so let's just leave it as is. You also have kind of under this top patch then you have access to the servos for the elevator and for the rudder, so you can make adjustments or replace them. You have a place to put the receiver, and I opted to put the Spectrum AR637T receiver, and I make use of all the ports on the receiver because I have to use kind of the usual 4 channels, and the 5th channel then I had to use for the flaps. The 6th channel I had to use for the reverse thrust that the speed controller I have, and I also had to use the bind port just to power the LED lights. And the lights then you have kind of on the wing tips, you have the lights, you have a really bright light in front, and you also have a light on the bottom of the plane. So I think the light setup is really good. Of course I would like to have seen kind of a tail light, that would be really great. You have kind of this simple water rudder, just a pin and then kind of the rudder piece. And I think this is a great solution. It's simple, but I prefer this one compared to the fish lines you have on the E-flite planes, and even kind of the FMS then when you have a included water servo rudder inside, then you have to run a cable. I think this is a really simple and great solution. You have all the linkage then for the ailerons and for the flaps installed. I discovered one problem then for one of my flaps, because kind of the angle which in the servo is mounted in, it doesn't really have the force just to raise the flap fully up. So it's a little bit it's a bit pointing down. Maybe it corrects itself during flight, I don't know, because I haven't really noticed anything bad. It's just an observation that it doesn't really go up all the way. You have to, of course, just connect these linkage then for the rudder and also for the elevator, just using kind of a plier just to do it. You also have a top hatch, which I think it's just a must. Any RC airplane which doesn't have a top hatch, I mean, you really have to rethink how you design them, because top hatch is just a must. A really huge space to put a battery. So more or less anything you can imagine. A quite short battery lead then from the speed controller. It does feature an XT60 connector, which I wish that this battery lead was a little bit longer, just to make it easier when I'm swapping batteries. A good prop, I would say, a good prop sound, a little bit bendy, more bendy than the kind of the APC thin electric props. No spinner, which I think is kind of interesting. What more? I think you have kind of you can also include in the box the kind of a thing you have to assemble if you want to do FPV flying. I never do FPV flying because I want to enjoy my planes, just standing on the ground, seeing them as a real RC airplane or as a real plane in the sky and maneuver it. I think that's just the way I want to fly all my planes. I think that the material then on kind of the foam and the paint is kind of a step down compared to the FMS, X-Fly and even E-flite. It's not bad, but you can certainly just feel that this is more like kind of the E-flite Valiant, which is kind of the poorest plane when it comes to the foam and to the paint, in my opinion. It's just a great flying plane, but when it just comes to the foam and the paint, this is more in line with the E-flite Valiant and not as good as, for instance, the Turbo Team Revolution. So just an observation. I don't think it will really affect the plane. I really dig this paint scheme. I think it's just it's fantastic, easy to orientate. The lights, this nose light is just fantastically bright, even in daylight. Maybe the camera cannot really see it that much, but when you fly it, you surely can orientate the plane. I can imagine in the dark, then all these navigation lights would just show up really, really great. So. I mean, don't have anything negative to say then. Of course, the sample could have been done a little bit better. As always, then the foam material might be a little bit better. But as far as flying and just having some fun, I think this Tundra version 3 then is just a fantastic flying plane. I will certainly also just come back to wheel flying with this plane, and hopefully it will be just as good or even better than the version 2.